Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're zeroing in on a really critical part of the automotive world, but one that maybe doesn't get talked about much: engine bearings.
That's right.
We've got a pretty detailed market research report here, and our aim is basically to pull out the key stuff, give you a real shortcut to understanding this, well, surprisingly dynamic industry.
Absolutely. Engine bearings, they might seem small, but yeah, they're kind of the unsung heroes. They allow smooth movement, reduce friction,
Right.
and everything from your standard combustion engine right through to EVs. It really affects performance, longevity, everything.
And the market size here is, well, that's not small change, is it? For
Well,
2024, the estimate is around $312.5 million.
mhm.
And looking out to 2032, it's projected to hit over $5,989.5 million. That's a compound annual growth rate of 5.0%.
Yeah, 5%. That's pretty solid, steady growth.
Yeah.
It really shows significant expansion is expected.
It really is. And what's interesting from the report is where all this demand actually comes from. Obviously automotive, but
Right. But it's not just automotive. That's a key takeaway. The report highlights really significant demand also coming from agriculture machinery and industrial machinery sectors.
oh, okay. Tractors, factory equipment, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Think about the heavy-duty stuff. Tractors, excavators, generators, pumps. They all need incredibly robust bearings. So that broad application base is really what's underpinning this steady growth.
Okay, so that 5% growth, that number makes more sense when you factor in those other huge sectors. That 2024 value, the $3.5 billion, it's heavily boosted by that heavy machinery usage then.
Definitely. It tells you something actually about the health of those other sectors too.
Right. What does it suggest?
Well, strong demand there points to continued need for durable, reliable equipment in really essential industries like agriculture and manufacturing. It suggests there's ongoing investment activity.
Which means demand for components like bearings.
Precisely. It's kind of a bellwether for broader economic activity, beyond just passenger cars.
Okay. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, or maybe the electric motor in the room. The shift towards EVs and hybrids. How is that playing out? Is it a challenge, an opportunity?
It's definitely both. A really fascinating dynamic. On one side, yes, the rise of pure EVs could, eventually mean fewer traditional internal combustion engine bearings are needed overall.
Makes sense.
But it's also opening up big opportunities. Hybrids still use combustion engines, often smaller ones working harder, which places unique demands on bearings.
Okay.
And even full EVs need specialized bearings, just, in different places. Electric motors, reduction gears. They all need bearings, often high-precision ones. So it's less about the market disappearing and more about it shifting. Manufacturers need to adapt.
Adapt their expertise, their products.
Exactly. Innovate or.
Okay, let's look at the map then. Where is this market concentrated? North America had the biggest slice in 2023, right? Around 35%.
Yeah, that's right. North America's lead in 23, it really comes down to a couple of things. A very well-established auto industry, obviously, but also, crucially, significant investment in R&D.
The technology focus.
Right. That constant push for innovation keeps them at the forefront, developing next-gen bearing tech.
And Europe. They weren't too far behind, about 30% in 2023.
Yeah. Europe's strength is really anchored in its powerful industrial base. Lots of heavy machinery manufacturing.
Back to the tractors and factory gear again?
Exactly. Those sectors are just huge consumers of bearings, providing this really consistent, substantial demand base for European manufacturers.
But the real buzz, it seems, is Asia Pacific, holding around 25% in 2023, but projected to jump to 28% by 2024. And the report mentions a 10% CAGR. That's huge.
It is huge. That's the standout growth figure for sure. What's driving it? Well, it's kind of a perfect storm. Rapid industrialization is happening across many countries there. Plus, there's a massive push in technological advancement, especially from manufacturing giants like China and Japan. They're not just making things, they're innovating. And as their industries expand, they're adopting more advanced machinery.
Which needs more and better bearings.
You got it. So yeah, Asia Pacific is definitely the most dynamic region to watch right now. Highest growth rate by far.
Okay, so it's a big pie and it's growing. Who are the main players getting the biggest slices?
Well, it's definitely a competitive space. Highly competitive, actually. But there are some dominant players. Looking at 2023 figures, MAHLE Aftermarket Inc. had the biggest share, roughly 21%.
Okay.
Followed by S&L Bearings Ltd. They had about 18%, and then NSK Ltd. with around 13%. So those three are pretty significant.
And are they just resting on their laurels? The report mentioned investments, M&A.
No, absolutely not. Resting on laurels isn't really an option here. These big players, they're constantly pumping money into R&D, looking for the next innovation. They're also using mergers, acquisitions, strategic partnerships
To stay ahead.
to stay ahead, expand their reach, get access to new tech or markets. And what's also interesting is the expectation that new entrants will appear, especially in those booming Asia-Pacific markets.
So competition's likely to heat up even more.
I'd say that's a safe bet, yeah, especially by 2024 and beyond.
Let's switch gears slightly. Fuel efficiency. It's obviously a massive driver in the auto industry. How do these small bearings fit into that picture?
They're actually fundamental to it. Engine bearings, their primary job in an ICE is to minimize friction between moving parts, crankshaft, connecting rods.
Right, metal on metal isn't good.
Not efficient, no. Less friction means less energy wasted as heat. So better fuel economy, lower emissions. It's a direct link.
Okay.
So as regulations get tighter, environmental concerns grow, consumer demand shifts, the pressure increases to make every component contribute to efficiency. That means the bearings need to be even better.
Mere material.
Exactly. Advanced materials become crucial. Things like bimetal or trimetal alloys. They're specifically engineered for low friction and the durability to handle tougher engine conditions. Meeting those stricter pollution rules often means higher combustion pressures or temperatures, so the bearings have to cope.
So it's not just about lasting longer, it's directly enabling cleaner, more efficient engines, which leads us nicely into technology. What are the big tech trends here?
Material science is definitely the key driver. Huge leaps there. We're seeing this shift away from the more traditional stuff, aluminum-based, copper-lead, tin-based alloys.
Towards what?
Towards more advanced materials. Polymer-based bearings are a big one, using materials like PTFE, Teflon or PEEK, which is a super strong, heat-resistant thermoplastic.
Yeah, the benefit is?
Much lower friction inherently. Plus, better tolerance to wear, chemicals, harsh conditions. Then you've got hybrid materials, sophisticated surface coatings. It's all about optimizing what we call tribology.
Tribology, the science of friction, wear, lubrication.
Exactly. These new materials and coatings can save weight, resist wear much better, and just improve overall mechanical efficiency.
The report mentions Schaeffler expanding in the U.S. specifically for electric mobility solutions. How does that tie in?
Yeah, that's a perfect example of the industry adapting. Even though EVs don't have crankshaft bearings, they absolutely need specialized bearings for their electric motors, for the transmission, other parts of the drivetrain.
Different types of bearings, then?
Different types, often needing to handle very high rotational speeds or specific electrical insulation properties sometimes. Schaeffler investing there shows they're focused on innovating for this electric future.
And it's interesting, isn't it? North America holds its share through tech leadership, while Asia-Pacific surges on industrial growth and adopting tech developed elsewhere, plus their own advancements in places like South Korea, Japan, China. Both are key growth stories, just driven slightly differently.
Okay, so we've covered the current scene, the trends. Where are the big growth opportunities looking ahead? Well, first off, just the baseline continued expansion of the global automotive sector itself. More people, more urbanization, better vehicles. That creates a steady demand for reliable engine parts. That's sort of the foundation.
Right.
But beyond that, as we touched on, the industrial sectors are a huge opportunity. The report shows significant adoption increases in 2023. Automotive is still the biggest chunk, maybe 40% of revenue.
Okay.
But look at the growth rates. Agriculture machinery up 12%. Industrial machinery up 8%. That's where a lot of the new demand is coming from.
Agriculture again. What's so special about bearings for tractors and combines?
Think about the conditions they work in. It's incredibly harsh, right? Dust, mud, extreme temperatures, constant heavy loads, vibration.
Yeah, not exactly a clean room.
Not at all. So the bearings in that equipment need to be exceptionally tough, really well sealed, and super durable. Reliability is paramount. Downtime during harvest season is just not an option.
So a specific demand for specialized, robust bearings.
Exactly. And as farming becomes more industrialized, with bigger, more powerful machines, the demand for these high-performance bearings just keeps growing. Same story in broader industrial machinery factories, construction, mining, the push for efficiency, for reducing downtime, for lowering running costs. It all drives demand for better quality bearings that last longer and run smoother.
Fascinating how these different sectors feed into the market. Okay, but it can't all be smooth sailing. What are the main headwinds, the challenges?
Well, one big one we already touched on is those ever-tightening emission standards.
Right.
For internal combustion engines, meeting those standards often means engines run hotter or under higher pressures. Bearings need to withstand that extra stress while still reducing friction for fuel economy. It's a tough balancing act from an engineering perspective.
Designing for conflicting demands, essentially.
Pretty much. Higher low capacity and lower friction. Better heat resistance and maybe lower weight. It required constant material and design innovation.
And the other major challenge must be the EV transition itself.
Absolutely. That's probably the biggest long-term disruptor for the traditional bearing market. As pure EVs gain market share, the overall volume demand for crankshaft bearings, conrod bearings, that will inevitably decline over time.
So companies need to pivot.
They do. It reinforces the need to innovate in bearings for electric motors, for hybrid systems which have their own unique requirements like stop-start cycles, interactions between the engine and the electric motor. It requires new designs, potentially different materials again. It's a major shift.
So adaptation is key. Looking crystal ball gazing now, what future developments are on the horizon for engine bearings?
Well, expect to see continued evolution in materials, novel composites, maybe ceramics in some specialized applications, further refinements in alloys, all aiming for higher performance, lower weight, better efficiency.
And more bearings specifically for EVs.
Definitely. A huge focus there will be on lightweight, compact, ultra-low friction bearings, tailored for electric drivetrains. Speed, efficiency, noise. Those are the priorities.
And you mentioned smart bearings earlier, IoT integration.
Yeah, that's a really interesting potential development. Imagine bearings with tiny embedded sensors.
What would they sense?
Temperature, vibration, maybe even lubrication film thickness, providing real-time data.
For predictive maintenance.
Exactly. Knowing when a bearing is starting to wear out before it fails, that could be huge for industrial applications, even potentially in vehicles down the line. The Timken acquisition of CGI, focused on precision automation, kind of hints at this trend towards smarter, more integrated components.
Wow. Any other trends?
Sustainability is becoming bigger too. Eco-friendly manufacturing processes, developing bearings from more sustainable materials, maybe even biodegradable lubricants or recyclable designs. That's gaining traction.
Okay.
Also, don't forget the aftermarket. As vehicles age, and especially with performance tuning, there's a growing market for high-performance or specialized replacement bearings. And finally, expect more collaboration, strategic partnerships between automakers, bearing suppliers, tech companies, pooling resources for R&D.
Right, to tackle those complex challenges together.
Precisely. The problems are getting harder, so collaboration makes sense.
Okay, so wrapping this up, it really sounds like the engine bearing market, despite maybe sounding a bit old tech, is anything but stagnant.
Absolutely not. It's incredibly dynamic. You've got solid growth driven by the traditional auto sector, plus this really significant expansion into agriculture and industrial uses. Then layer on top the massive disruption and opportunity presented by the shift to electric and hybrid vehicles.
So innovation is critical.
It's everything. Material science, new designs, adapting to tougher regulations like emission standards, even integrating smart tech. And geographically, while North America and Europe are still huge, all eyes are on Asia-Pacific for that really rapid growth and increasing competition.
Okay, so a final thought then for you, the learner. Just consider this. How advancements in what seems like a pretty small, basic component in engine bearing can actually ripple out and have such massive impact across entire industries. It affects the cars we drive, how our food is grown, how factories run, and it's right at the heart of a transition to electric vehicles. So what other foundational, maybe overlooked components out there are undergoing similar transformations? What else deserves a deeper look? Definitely something to think about.
Good question.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.